They do administer IQ tests in hospitals, but still, you shouldn't, like, brag that they gave you one. I was wearing a Lyle sweater last week. I couldn't remember the context of why someone would send me one. Jeff Goldblum said I dressed like a Menendez brother last he was on the show. You know, so either way, you know, thanks to whoever sent it, and, you know, thanks to Jeff Goldblum. It's really nice when you dress up and somebody compliments you. Seth Reese, I showed this last week. I said he wrote a movie called The Chef. He wrote a movie called The Menu, but, you know, I'm sure he'll get to The Chef eventually. The guy's banging out screenplays constantly. I say that as a compliment. He's an accomplished and prolific writer. The only thing that guy can't write? A usable monologue joke. Also, Daryl made all these cool action figures for all of our writers, and I definitely had the assumption that they'd all come running to my office on Monday to ask for theirs, and not a peep. So I guess the difference between Daryl and the writers of this show is Daryl watches corrections. Okay, I said 6,918 was when someone was watching someone else do a 69 through binoculars. And a bunch of you pointed out that the binoculars, if the binoculars are the 8, they're pointing the wrong way, which I think is what happens when you get caught, right? So you're like that. That's somebody watching, and then, you know, at some point, like, you know, the 9, like, readjusts or something. And then they're like, oh, the 6 sees, and they're like, oh! Someone wrote in their favorite position is a 68. That's when you do me and I owe you one. I closed with Thrive in my absence last week. Many were pleased, but one jackal wrote, it was fun, but now you've ruined it, find something else. And so because I'm always open to constructive criticism, I think I've landed on something for today that will make everyone happy. The Star Wars character's name is Mon Mothma. I mispronounced it as Mon Mothma. Apologies. I also made a joke about how she was from Jamaica. Obviously, that's not true. She's from New Jersey. Where in New Jersey? Monmouth. Curious to see how that reaction to that joke will play in the closed captioning. Because last week when I made my Jamaica joke, this is how the good people at YouTube decided to describe it. But I think this is a little unfair because if you are only experiencing the show from what you read, you might think that this faint laughter meant quiet laughter. What happened was somebody laughed so hard at the joke they fainted. So let me I'm going to play it back and so you can verify what I'm telling you. Let's play the clip. Moff Tarkin is from Iriada, and of course Mon Mothma is from Jamaica. I can see how faint laughter was confusing. Andy is at Comic-Con. He said, don't even bother. Also, you know, Daryl, who I don't want to criticize, but Daryl used a Peter Cushing action figure for me. And, like, Peter Cushing's got... I said last week you didn't have to give him the same forehead that I have. And then someone wrote, come on, Seth, yours is big enough to share. This is important. This is a real correction. I know we don't get serious here often. I made a joke last week in corrections where I referred to someone as Epstein's girlfriends. Many of you pointed out I should say victims. You're 100% correct. I apologize for that. You know who else didn't like calling them girlfriends? Epstein. He was always like, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's not put a label on it. Mostly we're going to talk about the croissant sketch from here on out. So if you didn't care for that piece of sketch comedy, the rest of this will be massively disappointing. All right, so first of all, I really liked the way people engaged with it online because, this was the late night cinematic universe. A lot of people were going back and forth. They were saying this was either written by Ben or Jermaine. And then someone had a rule of thumb that they came up with, which I think is very accurate moving forward. If Ben is in it, it was written by Ben. If celebrity baby teeth are in it, it was written by Jermaine. Someone wrote, I love whatever's wrong with whoever wrote this. We do too. I will say it's Ben's finest piece of writing for a lot of reasons. One, it absolutely got the best performances out of so many of our staff members. But also, by writing it, Ben started a chain reaction that ended with a comment. And as I was reading the comment, I thought to myself, what in the world? If you had told me this would one day be a YouTube comment, I would never have been able to work backwards to think what was the sketch that led someone to sit at a computer and write, Bays, Buck, and Lloyd can get it. Someone wrote, I had no idea Bays was hot. And based on his general mood, neither does he. Not walking around like a hot guy. Someone wrote, Bays is a smoke show. He looks like one of those CEOs who doesn't work. I'm gonna get Bays. I think if I got Bays like a fleece vest, that would 100% be. Someone wrote, loving Bays in his sexy Santa vibe. Just like thin. Bays would make such a good thin, grumpy Santa. He's just like, nobody's naughty, nobody's nice, you're all fine. I mean, again, this is all, it's just going to be reactions to croissant. Someone wrote, chef's kiss to Lloyd and his Irish accent. It's so funny to say chef's kiss and then get the compliment so wrong. It's like compliments to the chef. Based on how good this pasta is, can I assume you're from Poland? Someone wrote, am I the only one who feels that Tom looks like Epstein? Tom wears glasses. Although I hope this isn't one of those Clark Kent situations. But he does not, I will just stress to anybody who's watching, because again, Tom does not share any behavioral traits with Epstein. And we know because we keep an extra set of eyes on him, because of the resemblance. Jim crushed it. Also, Jim's appearance led to someone saying, this is the only show where security is dressed better than the host. So I heard a story, you guys. I heard a story. Now I'm just going to tell a story that I heard about Jim from yesterday. Vanessa Kirby is on the show. Vanessa Kirby, 8 months pregnant, and paparazzi are out. So Jim, one of Jim's jobs is to go down and get the guest into the thing. And we've got to clear a path. I guess it got a little jostly. And, we never want our guests to get jostly, but especially not when they're pregnant. And, Jim takes his job very seriously. He's a professional. And I guess he accidentally steps on a photographer's foot, just trying to clear the path. So the photographer says to Jim, do that again, and I'm gonna punch you in the face. So Jim, again, he's a professional. He knows his job is to get the guest upstairs. But someone says this to Jim, and then Jim turns to the guy and says, "Wait here for 10 minutes." The speed in which that guy must have packed up his camera bag. Now, a caveat, that story was told to me by John. So take it with a big old grain of salt. John is known to exaggerate. When he was in the NYPD, he worked in the embellishment unit. I swear to God. We wouldn't let him go back downstairs. Wait here for 10 minutes. This is a gamble. These showed up in a box. And I could have opened it, right? But I read the letter and I'm like, am I going to risk it? Am I going to let a jackal? Am I going to do a jackal reveal? We don't know if it'll pay off. Dear said, last week I was visiting our local swap meet, looking for some vintage video games. I flipped through some old Nintendo games and laughed when I discovered this game, Package A. It seems fitting to send your way. Sadly, it doesn't appear to have any Easter eggs featuring Mikey the Shoe. By the way, someone also said, they were like, oh my God, I can't believe Lloyd is actually Scottish. Because I've, talked about Lloyd and done a Scottish impression for Lloyd in the past in corrections. And someone else wrote, why would Seth lie to us? And then someone else said, well, he presents Mikey the Shoe as some, thug from the Bronx. But when you actually hear Mikey the Shoe, he's like an erudite gentleman. I wouldn't go that far. He's not what I make him out to be, but he's somewhere in the middle. All right, vintage video game. All right. So I guess there was an old video game called Jackal. My tale continues. When I returned to the same swap meet this week, I found the vendor and asked if he had any new games. He slid a box across the counter and let me take a look. I couldn't believe my eyes when I found this game, Package B. But when I turned around to ask the shop owner about it, I was stunned to discover that his entire stand had vanished. And I was left holding this game. I mean, again, I read that first, right? The writing was good. Patrick, the writing was good. Counting on you, bud. Faith rewarded. Faith rewarded, Patrick. Thrive in my absence, save for that one killjoy who can wither.